Hi everyone, in this video we're going to talk about how to use the do-step in iterative into the data step, and we're going to see through examples the different ways of how we can use it. So let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is write the do statement, and we always must close the do statement with the end statement. That's mandatory. Otherwise we're going to get an error. And as the statement we're starting right now is the do iterative, we need to specify an index variable, which we normally use the I letter as a convention. And we're gonna list the different values that this index variable is gonna iterate over. So the first, let's say that we want just one value, the number 1. So the do statement is gonna iterate, it's gonna execute the statements between the do and the end statement. In this case, we're gonna use these two statements, and we're going to print out in the log to see the result. So we select all our code and we hit F3, and in the log we get this result. So if we add another value, that means that these statements are gonna iterate twice because we have two values, as we can see here. So that's the main idea. Now let's change these statements with the E letter. So we print our, our result in the log, and as you can see, this do statement is going to iterate for all the different statements that we have between the do and the end statement for each of these values that we have in the list. So if we add another value, that means that these statements, in this case there's just one, are going to iterate once for each of these values. All right. Now, one thing you should remember is that you have to separate the values with a comma. That's also mandatory. And the values that you have in this list should be of the same type. I mean, it has to be, or all the values should be numbers, or all the values should be letters, but not one of them numbers and the other letters. And that's because this I variable should is going to follow the same rules for any variable in SAS, that all the values should be of the same type. Now let's execute an example with not numbers but letters. As this example, and as you can see, when we want to iterate over character values, we need to enclose the values with this simple quote, or it can be double quote. Now let's see another example with character values. Let's say we have this list of values, and we execute this one more time, and this is what we get in the log. Now focus on the second value. As you can see, SAS actually truncated the second value. I mean, it has just 3 values, 3 characters, and that happened because SAS automatically assigns the length for this index variable as the length of the first value he encounters in this list. So because this first value has only 3 characters, then SAS assigned the length of 3. But in this case, that's not what we want. So in order to fix this problem, we should specify the length of this value with the length statement like this. So we run this code one more time, and we can see that we get the result that we wanted. Now let's come back to an example with numbers. Imagine that you have this list of numbers. Now, because these numbers are continuous, as you can see here, you can actually reduce the code using the keyword to, as in this example. So as you can see, we're telling SAS that we want to iterate this variable from the value 1 to the value 10, right? So this is a simple way to say SAS that we want to iterate over many numbers, let's say 20 numbers. Okay, so imagine that now you want to iterate over a list of numbers, but you want to increment the numbers by a certain value, let's say by 2. So we can just use the keyword by, and SAS is going to increment the numbers by 2. As you can see, we get what we want. But I want you to notice something. Let's say that we want to know what's the value of the I variable at the end. I mean, by the time SAS ends the step. So let's run this code. This is what we get. Notice that the I variable ends with the value of 11. So what does that mean? And I know some of you were expecting to see the value of 9 because that's what was the last value of the I variable. And here's why it is important to understand the order in which SAS executes each of these statements. SAS actually executes, by the time SAS in this line, SAS executes the by, he increments the value of the index variable, and then he checks to see if that value is between these two numbers. And by the time SAS had the value of 9, he incremented the value in 2, and he got an 11, and then he checks in the range, and then he realizes that that didn't meet the condition, so SAS just didn't execute anymore. But at the end, the I variable had the value of 11. So we need to be careful if we are using the I variable for any other transformations after we execute the loop here. By the way, this increment number doesn't have to be always a whole number. It can also be a decimal number, or it can be a function that returns a number, or a variable that returns a number. Now, in this case, we're just gonna run with a decimal number. As we can see in the log, this range is incremented by a decimal number. Alright, now it can also be a negative number, but what we want, I mean, when we specify a negative number, that means that we, instead of incrementing the index variable, we want to decrement the value of the index variable. And we also should change the order of these numbers, because the first number, the start number, should be greater than the stop number. So in this case, it has to be 10, and this has to be 1. So we're gonna start from the 10, decremented the number by 1 to get to 1. Alright, so let's see what we get. As you can see, the last value of the index variable was 0, okay, because of what we just explained earlier. As we can see, The do statement is one of the most flexible statements in SAS and is one of the most useful too. Another way of using the do statement iterative is not iterating over constant values like with all these examples, but we can just iterate over variables as in this example. As you can see here, we're not just listing a constant value, we're just saying that we want to iterate over certain variables that we must have in our data set or we're creating. But this is just to let you know that you can also use variables instead of constant values. Now, let's see this example. Imagine that we have this range that we want to iterate over, but we just want to iterate only if it meets a certain condition. For example, let's say that we want to iterate over from 1 to 10, but only if the index variable is less than or equal to 5. So in order to do that, we need to write the keyword while, and we're going to specify the condition in parentheses, which is while the index variable is less or equal to the value of 5. So this is what we get. As you can see in the log, even though the range was from 1 to 10, it only executed the statements only if this condition was true. By the time it was false, then SAS didn't execute the statements the statements that we had in the loop. Now let's say that now we want to iterate over this range until a condition is true. Now notice that in this example we started with a condition that was true at the beginning. But now we want to start with a condition that is false at the beginning until it becomes true. Alright? So we can tell SAS that we want to iterate over this range until the index variable is greater than 5. Alright? So let's see what we get. Now notice that the last value of the index variable was 6. And you may wondering why is that? I mean, we told SAS to just run these statements only if the I variable was until the I variables was greater than 5, and here we see that SAS didn't understand what we wanted, and that's because we need to make sure we understand the order in which SAS executes these statements, and and unlike the while statement, the until statement executes always at the end. It's like if we had this statement, let's say that we had this statement here. I mean, this is not a valid syntax. This is just to show you the order in which SAS executes the statements, the until statement, for example. So SAS checks the condition only at the end of the loop. That's why by the time I was 6, it actually executes this statement because the condition was checked at the end. Meanwhile, I mean, the while statement instead executes its condition at the beginning. Let's check another example to see the differences between the while and the until option. So to get a better understanding of the until option, let's check this some example. Now let's say that we want to iterate over this range until this condition is true. Now notice that at the very beginning this condition is already true. So SAS for us SAS shouldn't execute any statements in this loop. Okay? So if you can see, I is already less than 5. So we shouldn't get anything in the log, but this is what we get. As we can see, SAS executes at least once, and that's because what I just said, that the until option actually executes checks at the end of the loop. All right, so that means that the when we use the until option, we are going to see that the loop is going to iterate at least once. In other programming languages like in Visual Basic, you see that the until condition is at the end. I mean, the syntax is more understandable because we from the syntax we understand that the execution of the until option is at the end of the loop, not at the beginning. But with SAS, we have to specify the until option like this. Now let's see another example with the while option. As you can see, we want to iterate over this range while a condition is true. While a condition is true, right? But as we can see in the very beginning, we're just not gonna meet this condition because we want to execute this loop while I is greater than 5, and as we can see, we're just gonna the range we are giving SAS is never gonna be greater than 5. So we expect that SAS doesn't execute any statement. So we run this code, and that's what we get. Now, unlike the until condition that executes that is checked at the end of the loop, the while condition is always checked at the beginning. That means that if we never are going to meet the condition, SAS is not gonna execute anything. All right, as we can see. Okay, we're gonna see our last example. We're gonna put all what we have just learned all together, and we're gonna see a great example. So remember that we kind of started with this example. Okay, so now let's say that we want to iterate. Once we get to the 3 value, we want to iterate from 3 to 10. That's something that we didn't actually see in the previous examples, but that's something that is acceptable in the syntax. So we run this program and we see that SAS iterated over these values, and once he got to this specification, then SAS executes from 3 to 10. All right, and we can actually just add another specification, just separating by with a comma, and let's say that we want to iterate from 1 to 3. I mean, maybe it doesn't make sense what we're just doing, but it's acceptable. I mean, maybe you're not gonna see these cases in real life examples, but that's something that we can do. Okay, now let's say we want to iterate from 0 to 3. Let's run this. We also want to print iterate over the value of 4, and then we want to iterate up from 3 to 0, but we want to, instead of incrementing the values, we just want to decrement by the value of -1. So here we see that we iterated from 0 to 3, then the value of 4, then from 3 to 0. And let's say that we now want to add another condition, but I'm going to need more space here. So I want to iterate over this from 3 to 0 while the index variable is greater than 0. That means that we don't even want to get this last value, because this condition is gonna limit the execution when the value of I is 0. Okay, so let's set what we get. Okay, as you can see here, we didn't get the value of 0. Now this is kind of all the different logic that we can handle in a do statement. I mean, that's a lot. As I said before, maybe these kind of these examples are not gonna be very, you're not gonna find these examples in real life, but that's something that you can do. Alright, with this last example we close our video. I hope you guys have liked this video, and we're gonna be uploading more videos about all these SAS statements and the programming language of SAS. Alright, so see you guys in another video. I hope you have a great day.